In this podcast, for Chapter 20, Musculoskeletal Injuries, we'll look at skills 20-5 and 20-6, looking at injuries of the forearm and the wrist. So it's always important to manually stabilize the injury. If you have two rescuers, the first rescuer can do that, but oftentimes, as shown here, the patient will perform that manual stabilization themselves. Before any splinting, make sure that you assess CMS. You can select the appropriate splint, and what's shown here is a malleable splint called a SAM splint. It's padded aluminum, and it can be fit to the uninjured side, or it could be formed into the shape of a sugar tong, in which case one side of the splint would run across the bottom of the forearm, wrap around the elbow, and then up the top side. That type of splinting will prevent rotation of the forearm and help protect the injury even more. In this case, a sugar tong splint is not shown, but we do see that the hand is in a position of function. We see that the splint is doubled over and it's been properly sized. You can secure the forearm to the splint with roller gauze or cravats. We typically avoid anything elastic because if it's too tight, that would compromise CMS. My preference is to secure from the distal end towards the proximal end, opposite of what's shown, but as long as that splint is secure and we immobilize, that's great. Now, we need to make sure that we immobilize the arm completely, so we want to go ahead and apply a sling and a swath. That's shown in skill 20-1. Anytime we apply a splint, make sure to reassess CMS. We can focus more on a wrist injury in skill 20-6, and here we see the idea of making sure the hand is in a position of function with just a slight bend in the wrist and the fingers formed, in this case, around some roller gauze. We would select an appropriate splint after assessing CMS, make sure it's properly sized, and then place that splint into position. The wrist has this slight bit of dorsiflexion right here, fingers in position of function. We secure the wrist in the hand using soft roller gauze, leaving the fingertips exposed because that will help us assess CMS after splinting. And then we finish the splint with, again, a sling and swath.